Welcome back to the channel. We got another spicy one today. Now today we're going to be looking at the craziest ways cartels traffic drugs. So all you guys out there, that into your little drug thing, I want to learn some kind of creative ways, you want to think outside the box, watch this video. Now I'm joking, we legit here, baby, we legit. All right, so yeah, let's jump into this one, man. Watermelon.
Smuggled
Wow.
in this
Pineapple.
delicious fruit was cocaine.
What do watermelons, submarines, and sex toys all have in common?
And sex toys as
They've all
well.
been used to smuggle drugs. And that's just
Okay.
the beginning. In September of 1985,
Listen, sometimes you need to be
a smuggler
creative.
named
Sometimes you need to be very creative. Watermelon. Okay, that's smart. And sex toys. Oh, God.
Andrew Thornton II was flying hundreds of kilos of cocaine from Colombia into the United States. However, Thornton got worried that the authorities were tracking his flight. So he dumped hundreds of pounds of blow down into the forests of Georgia and jumped out of his plane with a parachute.
Andrew Thornton fell to his death carrying too heavy of a load of cocaine while parachuting.
Unfortunately for
death.
Thornton, his parachute malfunctioned and his body was later discovered along with 75 pounds of cocaine, a couple
75?
of handguns,
Jesus
and thousands
Christ.
of dollars in cash. Much of the coke
Wow.
he abandoned, however, ended up being found and eaten by a huge bear.
Oh,
and this
my
story
days.
has now become the inspiration for a Hollywood movie.
It's a tale of
Cocaine
drugs,
bear, he got high as
planes,
fuck.
parachutes, and one unlucky bear.
This is how drug smuggling has gone from a few guys crossing the desert on mules to a sophisticated multi-billion-dollar industry, and the most inventive ways traffickers have managed to move their drugs around the world. Since the very beginning of the war on drugs, traffickers have faced one big problem: how to get prohibited drugs from producer to seller to buyer.
Exactly.
Luckily, drug cartels are incredibly innovative.
Lo que les dije, esto va a ser un vuelo con 55 kilos ya listos para su exportación.
Wait,
Tenía muy buenas habilidades como deportista.
Paragliding.
Y ya esta es mi vida.
At the
wait,
roots of international drug
paragliding.
55 kilos ya listos
Paragliding. Okay,
para
I'm not mad.
su exportación. Tenía muy buenas habilidades.
That's a lot. That's a
como
lot.
deportista.
That's a lot of
Y ya
cocaine.
esta es
He's
mi vida.
paragliding.
But the roots of international drug trafficking are a lot more basic than recruiting champion paragliders to fly bricks of coke over the rainforest. Though the war on drugs goes all the way back to 1914, the golden age of drug smuggling really began in the late 1970s and 80s. And it was largely driven by one thing: cocaine.
Coquiana.
It was the challenge of getting cocaine from the mountains of South America to the nostrils and crack pipes of the USA, which transformed drug trafficking into the most profitable organized criminal enterprise in history.
The American illicit drugs market is the biggest in the world, worth annually more than $80 billion. Last year, federal authorities intercepted 7,000 pounds of cocaine, 3 times the amount seized the previous year.
Wow.
This was the era of the so-called cocaine cowboys who flooded Florida with drugs from South America using boats, planes, and often human stomachs, and yes, rectums.
The drug smuggling
Oh, come on, man. That's the basics, man. Like your stomach, in your ass. That's basics, man. Like, that's nothing crazy about that. There's nothing crazy about that. That's so basic, man. Like, try harder.
is highly organized, and there are plenty of people prepared to risk
You swallow
imprisonment
it,
for
then
the
you
large
vomit it back
amounts
out.
of money offered by the dealers. Some will even go through the uncomfortable process.
Well, I guess back in them times, people never used to do that. They used to go like the normal route with transport, planes, boats. So I guess probably at them times people wasn't doing it like that. So I guess that's when it came up with, let's swallow it, in our stomach, or let's put it up our arsehole. So that's probably how it came about.
of swallowing plastic bags filled with narcotics, something that can end in death if the bags burst.
That's the next thing
So-called drug
too.
mules
So they have to secure the bag if you swallow it, because if that goes in your system, remember that acid in your stomach, both the bags, and you're fucked. Jesus Christ.
are most often impoverished people who are either paid or violently coerced by cartels to swallow or insert packages of illicit drugs and smuggle them on commercial flights. And when this goes wrong, the consequences can be deadly.
Very
If you're
deadly.
carrying as a mule packets of cocaine and one ruptures, the acute powder of cocaine is rapidly absorbed. It creates a disaster in your stomach. The first
Yeah,
thing
that's
they
it. It's
usually
game
feel is
over.
muscle contraction pain. Then they complain of chest pain because now the heart's starting to be affected.
But there's no way cartels could supply the endless market for illicit drugs just through people's digestive tracts. The majority of the cocaine cowboys operated fleets of small planes and boats, going from South America to the US, often through bases in the Bahamas.
A $100,000 cruiser with 2 young men on board is a classic profile case.
You guys got any guns? Okay, we're gonna board you, check your papers.
A radio lead to
You got
customs
any guns?
headquarters
No, sir.
indicates the agent's suspicions are well founded.
As the authorities began to crack down on boats going over the seas, traffickers went under the surface. This was the origin of one of the most impressive feats of cartel engineering, the narco submarine.
Submarine, exactly.
The first narco
Why were you
subs were
on?
intercepted in the early
Why was
90s,
the
but
submarine
they've surged in use
on top
in
of the
recent
wall?
years. They're assembled in underground boatyards hidden in the Amazon, and cartels can spend millions of dollars on each and every one. And that investment seems to be worth it.
A submarine,
The
you
largest
know.
haul-
A submarine. Yo, listen, do you know how, like, using a submarine, that means whatever you was doing before wasn't working, because I'm sure using your normal plane, your normal boat, we said, you know what, fuck this, man. We need to get creative. A submarine. And you still got caught. You still got
Ever
caught.
seized in a submarine is a staggering 7.7 tons of cocaine, and only a tiny
7.7
fraction of them
tons.
are ever intercepted. In 2019, Spanish authorities
No risk, no
discovered a
reward.
narco sub that had actually crossed the entire Atlantic from South
Wow.
America to Europe.
Over
Where
the
the Coast
last
Guards?
decade, particularly emerging from Colombia, but there's been a set of semi-submersibles, a couple of which have been caught by the US Coast Guards, which don't fully submerge, but just appear above the water. And they've also been used to take cocaine up the coast and bypass the border.
In the early 1980s,
Oh, shit.
Ronald Reagan amped up the war on drugs with a huge crackdown on the Caribbean smuggling routes. Obviously, this did not end the drug trade, because all the traffickers did was switch from air and sea to land, and the 2,000-mile US-Mexico border. This is how the war on drugs created the modern Mexican cartel.
Keep shooting low.
Pues sí, como
War
por ejemplo,
ready.
los carteles que tienen que mantener su gente y todo, tienen que sacar dinero donde hay. Si ya se acabaron sus reservas, pues tienen que buscarlo.
How old are you guys?
Yo tengo 27.
Mexican
13.
cartels have used pretty much every method.
What?
Se acabaron sus reservas, pues tienen que
13.
buscarlo.
How old are you guys?
Yo tengo 27.
Mexican cartels have used pretty much every method imaginable to transport drugs into the US, from fleets of airplanes to drones and
Basic.
literal slingshots.
Border Patrol
Slingshots.
agents near Douglas, Arizona found a catapult
Slingshot.
attached to the border wall, made to chuck bundles of marijuana into American territory. More
A
than
slingshot.
47 pounds of the drug found.
But the crowning technical achievement of the Mexican cartels is
A slingshot, but how far is that going? So like a slingshot, how far is that going? So do they sling it over some border and then somebody on the other side collect it and press one time? Because I can't imagine that goes very far. I can't imagine that
most
goes very far.
certainly the narco tunnel. Tunnels underneath the US-Mexico border
Yeah.
began to emerge in the early 1990s, but have exploded in use in the 21st century.
And they built that from
Hundreds have now
scratch as
been
well. You know.
discovered, some of which are thousands of feet long and equipped with electricity and purpose-built rail tracks.
Drug
shit.
tunnels have been built predominantly on the US-Mexican border, where they've taken drugs from cities like Tijuana to San Diego. They were developed mostly in the 1990s, and particularly by a very famous Mexican drug kingpin called Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who famously escaped Supermax prison in
Is that
Mexico
Chapo's,
by
cousin or
getting
something?
mining engineers to build a tunnel and then
Name sounds
escaping
familiar.
through that tunnel on a motorbike.
But the vast majority of the drugs that get smuggled into the US don't actually go underground. They come in the same way as most other consumer products, over the border. 35,000 trucks and 200,000 cars cross the border from Mexico to the US every single day. And some of them are full of cocaine, heroin, meth, weed, and fentanyl.
The North
It's a lot of
American
stuff,
Free
man.
Trade Agreement opened up trade between Mexico and the US. So there's a real explosion.
But people
in
need to
drug
realize too.
smuggling over
They
the
realize
border
needs to
between
understand that a lot of times, right? These cars and these boats and things like They get you because, you know what I'm saying, the police are in their pocket. The police are in their pocket. So it's not really, you know what I'm saying, like if you're doing the basics, you come into a plane or boat, the police know what they're doing. They're in their pocket. They know what they're doing. So the ones that are in the pocket, you know, slide through. But, you know, there are some Boy Scouts, like they say, the Boy Scouts, like, you know, stop that shit. You know what I'm saying? We got in there and search the fucking thing from top to bottom. And you find it in the weirdest ways, too. Like, deep inside the fucking vehicle, in the weirdest place. But that pineapple and watermelon, that was creative. That was very creative.
In the United States during the 1990s. So it wasn't so much finding a needle in a haystack as finding a piece of hay in a haystack. Completely impossible.
A piece of hay in a haystack.
Once again,
oh,
cartels
that's
have
very
driven
creative.
some extreme
That's very creative. Needle in a haystack, but a hay in a haystack. Okay.
innovation, smuggling drugs in just about every product imaginable, from bananas to hair extensions. But probably most impressive is the development of the so-called trap car. Cartels have custom-built vehicles with hidden compartments, which can often only be accessed by a very specific sequence of actions.
In the bottom of the center console, underneath the fake bottom, is a switch. Turn it down, nothing happens. But turn it up, and there goes the back seat, revealing a trap containing a stash of contraband.
These so-called trap cars, cars with secret departments in which you can hide fairly large quantities of drugs if you know what you're doing. And a lot of these cars have been
But to me, cars are just so, like, easy. Like, I mean, a basic car, right? Like, you could break that down to the T and you'll still find it. So there's not much compartments you can put in a car, don't matter what you do. So yeah, man, using cars, like, you're just asking to get caught.
On the US side of the border to take huge quantities of weapons down south to
like, how many
Mexico,
compartments
where
can you
they're
just hide in a
distributed
car?
and sold just as cheaply as you can buy them in a Walmart.
It's crucial to remember that all this impressive innovation is also enabled by the fact that cartels are rich enough to bribe everyone from individual border agents to national presidents. And guess what? Andrew Thornton II, the original smuggler from the Cocaine Bear story, he actually started his career as a cop.
Thornton was on the Lexington police force for 9 years. He was a narcotics officer between 1970 and 1973.
So he would know the ins and outs.
There's no reason that drugs like weed and cocaine need to be smuggled in these crazily inventive ways, apart from the fact that they're against the law. So maybe the craziest thing about this whole story isn't that a bear ended up eating some cocaine. It's that governments across the world thought they could stop people from wanting to take drugs by making them illegal. Good luck with that.
Good luck with that, exactly.